Opening credits. Undying Love. A vampire paranormal romance short story. By Summer Cooper. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Prologue. Jareth, London, present day. The first time Jareth saw Mara, she was walking down a dirt path in the woods. The year was 1609. It was nighttime, and the moonlight shone down on her dark hair and pale skin. She had a cloak over her shoulders and a basket in her hand. As she got closer, her granite-colored eyes found his, and it sent a jolt straight to his unbeating heart. This beautiful creature standing in front of him had Jareth mesmerized. Sometimes when you first see someone, you just know that this person is going to leave an imprint on your soul. Looking back now, he would say that was an understatement. Jareth had been chasing Mara for longer than he cared to admit. 421 years to be exact. And this time, in this place, he knew that her running would finally come to an end. This time she would be his. All he had to do was wait. Chapter 1. Mara, London, present day. London was breathtakingly beautiful. The mixture between old and new made Mara's heart yearn for times gone by. There seemed to be a thick blanket of history covering everything here. And that was the exact reason Mara was here, the history. She had been searching in all of her travels to try to find information about the mysterious quill, and Jareth's quill too, for it seemed he was doing a damn good job of following her. Mara took a deep breath of the night air, letting the moon wash over her as she walked towards her destination. Mara loved being a vampire, but feeding always seemed to get in the way of her work and research. You would think in this modern world there would be more options for vamps now, but all they have come up with is bagged blood. And as luck would have it, Mara was allergic to the stuff. So she'd found a donor bank, and every other day she made a visit. Today, the guide led her to a beautiful girl who looked like she was barely 18. She looked up at Mara with her innocent eyes, and Mara knew then that this was her first time at the bank. Mara moved in closer to her, settling on her left side. She could smell the blood running through her veins, and it put Mara's hunger on high alert. She laid a soft,
censored,
on the girl's lips and then another on her neck, right where the base meets the shoulder. The girl whimpered a little, and Mara quickly sank her fangs into the girl's soft skin, the bite easing her pain, leaving a wake of pleasure through the young girl's body. The blood was divine as it flowed into Mara's mouth and down her throat. How a person's blood tasted was a direct reflection of who they are, and in this case, Mara could taste the young girl's innocence. And she loved it. It filled all of her darkness, and helped kill the pain of old memories. Before Mara knew it, the girl started to pant in earnest, and Mara could tell that she was close to having an orgasm. That's the thing about feeding on a human, the bite makes them feel overly
censored,
oftentimes ending in climax. Which is why there is never a shortage of human blood donors. Mara eased off her sucking, and waited for the girl to peek before she retracted her fangs. Mara gently licked her bite marks and watched as they instantly disappeared, leaving no trace of their encounter. Exiting the bank, Mara walked down the dark sidewalk. She'd been researching this bookshop on Firth Street, which was supposed to be a top player in unusual artifacts. Mara only knew of 2 other people that had seen her quill. One of them was dead and the other was searching for her. The bookstore was a charming little hole-in-the-wall type, and if you didn't know what you were looking for you would walk right by it. There was an unmarked black door with a sign above that had only a crest on it. No words anywhere. Mara checked behind her before she entered, knowing that somewhere Jareth would be lurking. He always was. Seeing that the coast was clear, Mara opened the shop door and walked in. The interior was dimly lit, with only wall sconces casting light here and there. The feel was dark and creepy, and it set her senses on alert. Mara couldn't describe it, but something just felt wrong. The last thing she was going to do was leave, so she kept slowly walking towards the back of the shop. Mara passed rows of old books and trinkets, and the smell was overwhelming. She reached the back counter and rang the bell that was sitting there. There was a rustling sound from the back, and then a small man appeared. He was dressed in a crisp suit, which seemed to contrast with the shop. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked. Good evening, sir, Mara smiled. I'm looking for information on an artifact, and I was hoping you could help me. Well, you are in the right place then. What is the artifact you are inquiring about? Mara hated this part, and over the years she had gotten quite good at finding out information without actually saying what it was. What it is doesn't matter as much as what it can do, she said cryptically. The shopkeeper closed his arms over his.
Censored.
And how am I supposed to know what it does without knowing what it is, dearie? Mara smiled again. Time travel, she said simply, without giving any more details. The man uncrossed his arms and gave a quick grin. Well, that does help to narrow it down now, doesn't it? He said as he walked over to a bookshelf. He grabbed the rolling ladder and positioned it so that he could go up. With slow and methodical movements, he worked his way up to the top of the tall shelf, all the way to the ceiling. Here we are, he said as he climbed back down with the book in hand. Mara watched his every movement, remaining ever vigilant. From past experience, she knew that nothing ever went as planned, especially when it came to interesting artifacts like the quill. The shopkeeper walked back over to the counter and set down the dusty book. He opened the pages and started to slowly look through. There aren't many artifacts that have the power to time travel, he said as he continued to search through the book. But I'm sure you already know that, don't you, miss? What do you know? Mara sternly asked. More than you want me to, he said as he pointed to the page he was currently looking at. This right here is a seashell horn. Mara looked down to the picture and it seemed to look like a typical seashell, nothing special. How does it work? Interestingly enough, all one has to do is blow the horn and it takes them from one water location to another. So from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic, or from the Baltic Sea to the Red Sea. Fascinating, Mara said. Yes, it is. The tricky thing about the seashell horn is that you can't decide where it takes you, only it decides where you will go. And since there was only one horn to date, which was broken many thousands of years ago, I know that this is not the artifact you seek information on. You are a wise man, it seems. In that you are correct, dearie. The man turned the page again, and this time Mara's breath stopped. She tried to keep calm as she looked at the page. Her quill was staring back at her, artfully drawn in beauty and elegance. Mesa Apo, Tin Cardia was written underneath it in wonderfully worked script. What does that say? Mara asked as she ran her fingers over the words. Through the heart, the man answered. It's written in Greek. Through the heart? Mara questioned. What does that have to do with time travel? Unlike the seashell horn, the quill has the power to transport its owner to a place of their own choosing. In order to do so, they must look inside their heart for the destination. Only then will the quill work. Sounds too good to be true if you ask me, Mara said, hoping that she could deflect the man. The shopkeeper looked up directly into Mara's eyes. The quill is the most elusive time-traveling artifact around. There were only two made. If someone was to have possession of it, the possibilities would be endless, the man said as he scratched his chin. Something tells me that you might have a quill. Mara wasn't about to give anything away. And what makes you think that? If they are so rare, then it would be almost impossible to have one. That is true. But you see, there are only two different artifacts that are for time travel, the seashell horn and the quill. And we've already ruled out the horn, he said smugly. Jareth, London, present day. Jareth had been watching the exchange inside the shop from the sidewalk across the street. He couldn't see the exact details of the book that they were looking at, but he knew that Mara had found what she was looking for by the look on her face. It wouldn't be too long now before she would come out, and he could grab her. Over the years, his heart had grown cold and callous towards Mara and anyone else who tried to get close. Jareth couldn't believe that everything was actually happening. The night was a dark one, and just like many nights before, Jareth found himself waiting for her. Always waiting for her. His pulse was racing, and his hands were shaking as he tried to calm the energy that was racing through his body. Tonight would be the night that he would finally catch her and take his revenge. It almost seemed surreal the longer he thought about it. It might seem a bit extreme since all she had done was break his heart and his family, but this was the mission and reason for his life. This is what would define him, and he was in charge of his own future. Maybe after he finished, he could finally get the peace that he'd longed for. But it would be a lonely future with no mother, no brother, and no lover. Would he keep the quill? Or would it be destroyed in this quest for vengeance? There were so many things running through its mind, his senses were on overload, and he knew that he needed to calm himself in order to complete this task, or it would be his last. Mara came out of the bookshop, and without her usual demeanor. She didn't stop to check for a tale like she had so many times before, but instead her head was down and she had something in her hand. Jareth knew that this was his moment, so he silently moved towards her, and as he got closer, he realized that she was holding a book. It must be the same book from the shop. But what was Mara doing with it? And why was she so thrown off again? It wasn't like Mara. She always double-checked and assessed every situation before she moved forward. Mara was a clever girl, and that is how she had escaped him for so many years, over and over again. So for her to be so flustered, Jareth knew that this was indeed the night. He let her walk a little further, and he was still stunned that she didn't realize she had a tail. But what if she did? What if she knew that she had a tail, and she was just letting him follow her? Wouldn't that be something? That would be something indeed. Jareth had to be quick about it, before she actually did come back to reality, and go back to being her usual self. Jareth found an alleyway that was close, and using his vampire strength and skill set, he overpowered the unsuspecting Mara and hustled her down the alley. "What's happening?" Mara screamed. "What are you doing?" she yelled as she hit Jareth again and again. "Well, hello there, Mara," Jareth said. "Just the person I've been looking for." Jareth placed a large hand over her mouth and observed the familiar look of fear in her eyes. "Oh Mara, it's been far, far, far too long. I forgot how beautiful your eyes are up close and personal. For you see, I've seen nothing but your backside for centuries. A fine backside it is, I'll give you that, but I've been searching for you, looking everywhere, and yet here you are back in my arms once again. You know I wouldn't think twice about squeezing your neck and watching the life slowly leave your body. It would be beautiful really," Jareth said as he looked at her beautiful yet terrified face. "But killing you would be too easy. I have plans for you. Big plans. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take my hand off of your mouth and you won't scream. You won't say a word. You will be quiet, and before you know it, we'll be back in private where this conversation should take place." Jareth tried to grab the book from Mara's hands, but she struggled against him. Both of them being vampires gave them a tremendous amount of physical strength and energy, and Jareth knew that if he wanted to overpower Mara for much longer, it would take every ounce of effort that he could muster. Mara was a strong one and a fighter. She wouldn't go down easily. Jareth looked Mara in the eyes as he once again tried to take the book from her. "Don't make me regret not killing you right now," he threatened. Mara let go and let him take the book. And before she knew what was happening, Jareth had her hand, and they were walking on the street like they were a normal couple. Like that might work. They were the farthest thing from a normal couple that two people could possibly be. Wherever Jareth was taking her wasn't far, because he turned a corner and stopped at a brick building. He got out a set of keys and unlocked the door, quickly shoving her through the entrance. Inside was beautiful. It was modern but somehow still seemed to feel warm and inviting. Chapter 2. Jareth walked Mara to the elevators, and they stopped and waited as he hit the button. It wasn't long before the beautiful ornate doors opened to a large elevator box. The ride up was a quiet one, and it didn't take long, or maybe Mara's mind was just worrying too fast that she couldn't gauge time anymore. She had to admit, she was slightly scared as to what was going to happen. But she shouldn't be worried because after all, this was Jareth. This was one of the men that she'd fallen in love with. There was a time when part of her own heart belonged to him, and vice versa. That time was beautiful, tragic, and shattering. Jareth wanted revenge for his family, and that was understandable. Mara knew that. She had, after all, left him with a mess to clean up. But how was Mara to know that when she left on that horrid night, that he would be able to come after her? The oracle had given Mara a quill, but she didn't know that Jareth had one of his own. It took Mara quite a while after she'd left the first time to figure out that there even was another quill. She was happily living her life in Prague, trying to move on, when she saw him in the market. He hadn't seen Mara, but she'd seen him, and that was enough. Later that day, Mara was traveling through time again, and that was the start of their 400-plus-year game. The elevator door opened, and Jareth once again pulled out another set of keys, this one to what looked like an apartment door. The inside of the Jareth's apartment was huge and looked to be a penthouse. Everything about it screamed sensual. The carpets were plush, the colors were warm, and the furniture looked overly inviting. The artwork was composed of various bodies, all entwined in different poses. Needless to say, it wasn't what Mara had expected from where Jareth lived. The places that she had chosen to live over the years weren't anything close to this. They were places that she stayed until it was time to jump again, leaving everything behind. And over the years, Mara had indeed left a lot of things behind. Jareth sat the book down on the coffee table in front of the couch. He motioned for Mara to sit down on the couch across from him, and she did so with little hesitancy. Even though she didn't want to admit it, she'd missed him. There had been many, many cold nights, and yet here he was, sitting here in the flesh, less than 6 feet away from her. Mara looked at Jareth, and she saw his beautiful hair and eyes. Everything looked the same, but hardened from years of struggling to find her. Mara tried not to feel guilty about what happened, but it was hard not to. This man hated her for what she'd done, and she deserved it. "What do you want with the book?" he asked. "What does it matter?" she questioned back. "Mara, I've been following you for years, and I would think by now that I know you better, and I know without a doubt that you have been looking for information about the quill for many years. And tonight, after you left the bookshop, you were thrown off your game. So are you going to tell me why this book is so important? Or are you going to make me force it from you? Because if you think that I won't hurt you to find out answers, then you're wrong. Very, very wrong." Jareth leaned forward on the couch and set his elbows on his knees. He started to open the book, but Mara's hand rushed out and stopped him before he could. "It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with our past or what happened. It's not important, okay? It's not important." "Is that supposed to satisfy me?" he asked. "Because if that's your answer, I found it sorely lacking. Do I need to show you what happens when you don't give me what I'm looking for?" he threatened. "Please, Jareth, just let me explain. This whole thing is just... This is not your time to try to dig your way out of the colossal mess that you made. I have been walking in your shadow for so long, and now it's your turn. I'm done, and now it's your turn to tell me what I want to know. That is the least that I deserve." Without another word, Jareth got up off the couch and pulled Mara towards the bedroom, where he tied her to the wooden chair that was sitting next to his desk. "I have been waiting for this day for far too long, Mara," he said, as he walked in a slow circle around the chair. "For 421 years I have been chasing you, always one step behind, but not today. Today you will know my wrath, my pain, my rage, for it was you who made it. Jareth, please. No. You don't get to try to change my mind. Not after what you did, after what you took from me. Was my brother not enough that you had to kill my mother too?" Jareth bellowed. He untied Mara's wrists from the chair and helped her to stand. He then unbuttoned her jeans and yanked them down and off her feet. He made quick work of her shirt next, leaving Mara standing there in her bra and underwear. He tied her hands again, this time in front of her. Jareth sat down on the bed and pulled Mara down so that she was laying stomach down across his lap, with her ass in the air. "This is for Paris," he said in a stern voice as his hand came down hard on her ass cheek. Mara gasped in a breath as the sting worked its way through her body. Jareth had never acted like this before, and she found herself unsure of what would come next. "Prague," he said as another slap landed. "Rio." Slap. "New Orleans." Slap. "Vancouver." Slap. "Dublin." Slap. London. Slap. Punishment. That is what this was. One slap for each place that she had run to. Mara's
censored
was on fire now, and she didn't think she could take any more of his brand of punishment. Just then, his palm worked its way over her sore flesh and it tingled in all the right places. There were no other words between them, as his hand continued to work its magic. Mara could feel his hardening length rubbing her stomach, and it reminded her of a time when this man's love was for her keeping. Jareth slipped 2 fingers inside Mara, and she thought she would die from the pleasure. This man claimed to hate her, yet here he was working her.
censored
Like it was his dying wish. His fingers moved in and out at a rapid pace, and Mara's mind was starting to glaze over in passion. Chapter 3. Jareth, Greece, 1608. As a second son, Jareth enjoyed more freedom than his brother Brendan did. Brendan was held to higher standards, and was expected to take over their father's place on the Vampire Council. Brendan had his life mapped out for him, whether he liked it or not. He would be expected to marry who their parents had picked for him, without question. The Vampire Council was made up of descendants of the originals, and our family was no exception. To be a member of the council was the highest of honors, a birthright, and yet... Brendan, Greece, 1608. Helena was not your typical loving mother. She was shrewd and crass, not patient and understanding like most mothers were. For as long as Brendan could remember, his mother had been pushing her own agenda onto him. She was forming him into who she wanted him to be, but Brendan was tired of trying to become someone who he didn't want to be, birthright or not. He respected his role that he would play on the council, but he hated how much it overshadowed his future. Brendan wanted nothing more than to be free and soak up the moonlight with the girl he loved, Mara, beautiful Mara, who could speak to his soul with just one look. Mara, Greece, 1608. Mara felt troubled. She had feelings for both Brendan and Jareth, but she knew that she couldn't have them both. The right thing to do would be to give up Brendan, so that he could marry accordingly, but how can one ask the heart to make such a noble sacrifice? Not knowing what to do, Mara had gone in search of the oracle to hopefully get some answers. Mara knew for sure that the oracle would give her the solution she was looking for. She asked the oracle which boy she should choose, and the seer said, "Only your heart knows it's true.
censored
When the time is right, use this quill. In your heart, you will find the destination." And with that, she'd handed her a beautiful quill pen. Mara held it in her hand, and wondered how the feather-light pen would help her. The night that she came back with the quill, both of the boys didn't know what to make of it. And to be honest, neither did Mara. She had gone to the oracle for answers, and had come back more confused than ever. How was this quill supposed to help her heart choose? Mara didn't know that they were brothers, until she had seen them together one night. The moon was full, and there's something about a full moon that loosens your inhibitions. Mara had already been on a few midnight walks with Jareth when she met Brendan. Jareth was classically beautiful with handsome features and a strong jaw, but when she had seen Brendan for the first time with those ice-blue eyes, Mara knew that she would never be able to say no to either one. They weren't happy when they first found out about the other, but in the end, they were happier to share her than to lose her. Things had been working out between the three of them, until the boy's mother, Helena, found out. She threw a fit, since Brendan was to be married to another original descendant. Mara felt like she was losing him, and that was hard. Jareth stopped in his tracks when he spotted Mara's quill. Well, it wasn't hers, but a perfect match. He'd asked the seller about it, but the peddler didn't seem to know of its purpose or true value. Without a second thought, Jareth purchased the quill and practically ran home in his excitement to show Mara. He could just see the smile on her beautiful face now. Fate, though, had other plans, because when he arrived home, he stumbled upon a scene that would haunt him for eternity. Mara took the quill and without hesitation, she began to write down coordinates. She looked back over her shoulder to see Jareth running after her. Mara felt tears running down her cheeks, and she knew that he wouldn't understand, that he would blame her for their deaths. Just then, the ink on the page began to light up and rise above the paper. It grew higher and then sucked Mara through a portal to another time and place, leaving behind the wreckage of her life. Jareth couldn't believe his eyes. His mother and his brother were both dead, and Mara had just vanished out of thin air. What was happening? What was the cause of all of this chaos? He moved to the page where the coordinates were written. He looked them over and gently ran his finger over the paper, looking for clues. Emotions were overpowering his brain, and all he could see was red. Why would Mara kill them? His Mara, who loved him, and yes, his brother too. The sweet, beautiful girl was now replaced with this evilness that was unrecognizable. Well, he wouldn't have it. He would hunt her down and avenge his family's death. Jareth pulled his quill out of his satchel, and he copied her writing exactly. It wasn't long before the same ink started to rise and envelop him. The final thought before he vanished was that he was going to kill her. Chapter 4. Mara, present day. I was planning to use the quill to go back in time, if you have to know. I wanted to go back in time to make things right. I wanted to try to save your brother's life. I wanted so bad to not have found him the way I did. And never been goaded by your mother. To never have committed that heinous crime. To never have walked away. And that things could be different. I wanted to save your brother. I've been searching at every location we've been through, for information on time travel and about the quill. And so far I just haven't found what I've been looking for. Every place is a dead end, every turn the wrong one, Mara said. Here in London, I have finally made progress. Finally, I was talking to the shopkeeper, and he was telling me everything that I wanted to hear, and yet at the same time, I didn't hear any of it. I think that I knew it would be the moment that you stepped in, after all this time, and would be able to exact your revenge. I knew the moment I walked out of the bookstore that you would be there, because you're always there. Part of me wanted you to. I wanted you to win because I was tired of fighting, I was tired of running, I wanted this to be over. I want this to be over. All I want to do is try to make things right. That's all I've been doing since the day I left. That's all I've been doing. Trust me in knowing that's what I was doing. But how could you? I never told you what happened. I never told you anything. All I did was run. I ran and I ran and ran, and I can't think anymore because nothing makes sense. I ran until I couldn't feel Brendan, couldn't feel anything, and yet I never was able to find a place for that to happen. And even Helena's twisted memory never failed to leave me. Do you think that it's even a possibility? He asked. What I mean is, do you think it's a possibility to go back? To go back to where it all started? I don't know, she said. I've been hoping that it's an option. I've been searching everywhere for the answers that I seek, but I haven't found anything. I never used the quill to go back in time. I've only used it to go forward, and even then, never in a purposeful direction. I've never decided. The heart tells me where I want to go. I've never tried something so big before. What if I fail? What if I go back and everything is wrong, and I can't fix anything and it's all been for nothing? What happens then? Well, I guess now is as good a time as any. We've already wasted too many years now. It's time to finally do something about it. Where's your quill? He asked. My quill is at home, locked away. Come on, let's go get it, he said. They left and went to Mara's place. The stark difference between her apartment and the stylish penthouse were undeniable. Where his furnishings were rich and sensuous, hers were cold and drab. Mara quickly found the quill where she had it hidden underneath the floorboard in her closet. She brought the quill to the living room and simply stared at it for a minute. Not knowing what to do, she looked up at Jareth. He was also looking at the quill. All right, Mara, he said. Now is the time. Show me what you can do. He found a piece of paper and offered it to her. She waited a moment, trying to find the answer that her heart was telling her, but she couldn't feel the sureness that she had felt so many times before. Something's wrong, she said. It's not working. What do you mean it's not working? I mean that something is wrong. I can't feel it in my heart like I normally do. Mara tried to do it again. And again. And again. She kept trying until she was so frustrated that she could feel the tears flowing from her eyes. I just don't understand why it's not working. It's always worked before. Something's wrong, try it again, Jareth said. When you did it in the past, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? I was feeling scared, but that I knew I had to find out an answer for Brendan. Brendan was in my heart, and that's when the page lit up. What were you thinking of every time you wrote with your quill? What was in your heart then? She asked. You, he answered. You were in my heart. So for me, it was easy to follow you because it was you who I wanted. Mara was nervous, and she could feel herself starting to lose hope. After all these years of trying to find an answer, after all the blood, sweat, and tears, was this the end? Mara knew that this couldn't be it, so she kept trying again and again and again. Jareth, I just don't know what to do. I've been trying and struggling, and I just can't get it to work like it's supposed to. What's wrong? Why isn't it working like it's supposed to? Mara, just stop, Jareth said gently. He could see that she was clearly getting upset by their lack of outcome. Let's stop and think for a minute, he suggested. Why do you think it's not working yet? I don't know, this is just so frustrating. I know you're upset. What about the book? He asked. Do you think it has the answers that you're looking for? I don't know, Mara answered. They sat down at the kitchen table. They opened the book and flipped through the pages until they came to that beautiful drawing of the quill. They looked and looked, but there didn't seem to be any clues that could help them. There was only the picture and the saying in Greek. Out of all of the pages, there wasn't anything written, which meant that they would have to go back to the bookshop to interrogate the man about the quill. I think we need to go back to the shop, Mara said. But I'm not sure the shopkeeper is going to be happy, because I might have stolen the book from him, Mara admitted. The two walked back to the bookshop and entered the dimly lit space. The man was indeed unhappy and immediately told them. What are you doing here? The nerve. Where is my book, you thieving bastard? He bellowed at Mara. Well, hello there, sir. Lovely to see you again, she said. You've got some nerve coming in here again, like I would even think about helping you with anything after the stunt you pulled. Oh, but I think you will, Jareth drawled. You see, we have a very important task, and I just know that you are the person who has the answer we're looking for. You're out of your bloody mind. Get out of my shop. Jareth confronted the man and pinned him against the counter. Now listen here, you can help us or you can be my meal for the night, he said as his fangs lowered to the man's neck. Your choice. Ah, no. Please don't bite me, the man pleaded. Fine, I'll help you. Jareth retracted his fangs and set the man up straight again. That's the spirit. We need more information about the quill. There was nothing written in the book, which led us back to you since you seem to be so knowledgeable about these things, Mara explained. Of course there isn't anything written in the book. What do you want? Instructions on how to use it. If they were written down, then anyone would be able to use the quill, and we can't have that now, can we? The man said sharply. Sadly for you people, I already told the girl everything I know about it. And how do we know that you're telling the truth? Mara asked. I guess you'll just have to take my word for it now, won't you? Is there anywhere else we can find out more? Jareth asked. The man thought for a moment before he spoke. There is someone. Do tell, Mara said. His name is Lewis McMalden. He has an antique shop of sorts. He can help you find what you're looking for. And you're sure of this? Jareth questioned. Without a doubt. Okay then, where is this antique shop located? The man took out a small piece of paper, wrote down the address, and handed it to Jareth. Now if you don't mind, get out of my shop and don't bother coming back, he warned. Lewis McMalden's antique shop looked like a museum. The glass front store was pristine and thoughtfully arranged as to encourage customers to browse. Unlike the little hole-in-the-wall bookstore, this place was well lit and gave off a high-end feel. Jareth and Mara looked around the place, while they waited for someone to come out from the back. McMalden had an array of different things, ranging from prehistoric ancient artifacts to 19th century items. Mara was looking at a wonderfully crafted golden harp when she felt a chill across her back. She turned around, and there stood the most beautifully frightening man she had ever seen. He was dressed in a suit, and it only helped to accentuate his muscular frame. His jacket was buttoned and it showed his lean waist and wide shoulders. His cheekbones accentuated his angular face, and his white blonde hair was perfectly styled in the latest fashion. His eyes, though, were what scared Mara the most. They were the color of black coal, and he seemed to be able to see right through her as she stood there watching him. "Welcome to McMalden's antique shop," he greeted coolly. "I am Louis McMalden. What can I do for you?" Mara gave a questioning look to Jareth, but he ignored it as he moved forward to greet the scary man. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. McMalden," Jareth said as he gave him a strong handshake. "My name is Jareth and this is my friend, Mara," he said, gesturing to Mara. "We were at another shop, and the shopkeeper didn't have what we were looking for, so he sent us your way. He thought that you would be more suited to our needs." McMalden looked closer at them, his calculating gaze moving back and forth between the two. "And what might your needs be exactly?" he questioned. "We are looking for information on an artifact of sorts. That much is given, you wouldn't be here otherwise. Now, if you will quit wasting my time, feel free to come back again when you really want to talk," McMalden said as he started to turn around. "Wait," Mara yelled. McMalden stopped and looked at Mara's hand on his arm. Mara quickly removed her hand before she went on. "Please wait," she said in a quieter tone. "I have been searching for answers for far too long, and my friend is just overly cautious when talking about it. We meant no disrespect, it's just that we have to be extra careful because if it fell into the wrong hands it would be horrible," Mara explained. "Are you going to tell me then?" he said as he crossed his muscular arms. Mara took a deep breath, trying to calm her jittery nerves. "What do you know about a quill?" she asked. "A quill?" McMalden confirmed. "Yes, a quill. Well, now that is quite the artifact." He lifted his hand and scratched his chin with his fingers. "What are you wanting to know about it?" he asked. "We're looking for its history, background information if you would," Mara said. "Off the top of my head, it has a Greek origin. The quill gives the owner the power to travel through time, but the location lies within the heart, not a compass." He looked at the two. "Are you in possession of the quill?" "No," Jareth answered before Mara could open her mouth. "We're just doing some research on it." Mara looked back to the man. "I came across a reference about the quill in one of the old texts I was reading, and I was intrigued by the nature of such an object." "A shame," McMalden said. "An object like that is rare, and would have made an excellent addition to my antique collection." "Is there anything else you can think of about the quill?" Mara asked. "Anything about how it works?" "Like I said, the quill is driven by the hearts."
Censored.
"I have heard stories of that being tricky when the owner wants to go one place, but the heart wants a different one. The quill's power was bestowed upon it by an unknown ancient oracle. Given the age of the quill, it isn't surprising that there isn't more information about it." "I'm sorry, but that is all I know," he said. Mara felt that McMalden knew more about than he was letting on, but she wasn't about to push this frightening man into anything. "Thank you for your time," she said as she shook his hand. Jareth held the door for her as they exited the shop. "Do you think that he told us everything?" he asked her. "No, I don't, but I didn't want to push him." "Bit of a brute, huh?" Jareth joked. "That is an understatement," Mara laughed. Mara was finding herself sliding back into old habits with Jareth. The way they were walking down the sidewalk, so close to one another, reminded her of their moonlight walks so long ago. In reality, it had been over 400 years, but to her it still felt like yesterday. Running away from Jareth had been one of the hardest things she had ever done, but at that moment, it was the only option. Mara had loved both of the brothers fiercely, and those feelings were returning with the more time she spent with Jareth. Hunger pains brought Mara out of her thoughts and back to reality. She looked over at Jareth and took his hand. "Come on," she said. "I need to feed before we continue. You know, I almost had you in Rio. You had just finished feeding as I walked in, and before I could reach you, you were gone again," he confided as he rubbed his thumb over her hand. "Always one step ahead of me." Mara smiled at the grim memory. That was indeed the closest he had ever gotten to her. Yet look at you now. I would definitely say that you won. Jareth stopped and pulled her to him. "I think we both won," he said as he placed his lips on hers. His
censored
was soft, and Mara let herself get caught up in it. Mara slowly pulled away, not wanting to ruin the perfect moment. After so many years apart, it was surreal to be back in Jareth's arms. They started walking again, and soon arrived at the blood donor bank. Jareth opened the door for Mara, but before she could walk in, she was hit with a brute force from the side, and quickly found herself slung over her attacker's huge shoulders. "Mara?" Jareth yelled, as he tried to fight off his own attacker. "Jareth! Help!" "Jar!" she yelled, but to no avail as she was silenced by a beefy hand knocking her out. Chapter 5. Mara, present day. Mara was jostled awake by a swift kick to her side. She doubled over in pain, and she thought for sure that she was going to die. "Ah, so nice of you to finally join us," said a deep voice. Mara looked up, and found the black eyes staring back at her. Lewis McMalden stood before her, and from her vantage he looked even bigger than before. He was still dressed in his suit, but his jacket was missing, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up to the elbow. "You," Mara moaned as the pain continued to rack her body. "Yes, sweetheart, me," he said as he walked closer towards her. Mara managed to pull herself up to a sitting position, and leaned back against the hard surface of the wall behind her. "What do you want?" McMalden laughed, the sound grating Mara's sensitive ears. "I would think that would be an obvious answer," he said as he kneeled down so that they were face to face. "I want the quill." "I don't have it," Mara spoke without hesitation. Even though she knew he might kill her, the quill was too important to hand over to this menacing creature. "I told you that at the antique shop." "Yes, you did say that. But you see, you don't question things as rare and as unknown as that without having a reason. So I will ask again, where is the quill?" "I don't." Mara was silenced by McMalden's finger pressing to her lips. "Don't waste my time with your lies," he warned. "We both know that I could kill you without a second thought, and believe me, dear, you won't be the first person I've killed looking for the quill." Mara swallowed and tried to get her nerves in check. She could feel her hands shaking, and her eyes were starting to water with red tears. Her body was in too much pain, and she was having a hard time just trying to breathe. McMalden's black eyes were watching her, waiting for her to succumb to his demands. Up close his face was even more captivating. "Why do you want the quill?" she asked softly. He seemed to be surprised at her question, and he thought long and hard before he answered her. "As a vampire, I have lived 1,000 lifetimes. I have had many relationships, but only one love. I have been searching for the quill so that I can go back to her," he said somberly. Mara was intrigued by his answer, because it wasn't what she had expected him to say. "Then it appears you and I have something in common," she said. "For I am also looking for my love." McMalden's gaze sharpened on her. "I thought that man was your lover? The one from the shop who you were
censored
on the street?" "He is my love as well." "One of them," she confirmed. The man laughed again. "A whore then?" Mara's anger was instant, and it reminded her body of what a sad state it was in. "You know nothing of my love." "Oh, but I do," he said. "You have 2 lovers, one of which is already here with you. So tell me, why are you being selfish and keeping the quill for yourself? Why don't you give the quill to me, so that we may both have a chance at our love?" "I don't have the quill," Mara said again. "So you say," McMalden said as he grabbed Mara around the neck and started to clench his heavy fist around her. Mara could feel her breath slowly leaving her body, and she knew that this was the end. After all of the running and searching, this would be the moment that she would get to be with Brendan. That was her last thought before she blacked out. Jareth, present day. Jareth had fought his attacker, but it was useless. The man had shoved a rag full of chloroform under his nose, and he didn't come to until he was chained to a wall. The room was dark and damp, almost like a cellar or a dungeon. He rubbed his head and instantly noted that the chains weren't made of silver. Why would someone take the time to lock him up and not use silver? The only thing that came to his mind was that they didn't know he was a vampire. Jareth sent up a silent prayer of thanks and decided to wait until someone came before testing his restraints. Aside from being chained to the wall, he wasn't injured in any way, and he couldn't work out what was really happening. But he did know one thing: Mara was not here and he needed to find her, the sooner the better. He didn't have to wait long before he heard heavy footsteps approaching. The door to the room opened and a big man was standing there. Jareth could tell by the man's scent that he was a human. "It's time," the guy said. He walked over to Jareth and bent down to unlock the chain from the wall, but still keeping his hands restrained. Jareth didn't waste any time. He flexed his arms, and the thin metal easily pulled apart as he used his now free hands to grab the man by the head and knee him in the face. The big man cried in pain as he shuffled backward, holding his broken, bloody nose. Jareth took advantage of the shock and punched him in the head, and then in the stomach after he fell to the floor. Jareth made sure that the man was unconscious before he left the room. He moved down the hallway at a quick pace, and he tried to focus on the sound of Mara's voice, but he couldn't hear her. Not wanting to stop, he kept going down the hall, turning when it curved in the hope that it would somehow lead him to Mara. All of a sudden, he heard a loud scream, and it made him stop dead in his tracks. It was Mara, there was no question about it. He waited for another scream, so that he could keep moving in the right direction. After 3 screams, he was flat out running to the sound of her voice. Scared and unsure, he wouldn't allow himself to slow. Jareth came to an opening in the building, like a huge cement den, and that is when he saw her. She looked like she was sleeping, but Jareth knew that she was unconscious. He moved to her side, and he could still hear her gentle breath. Her dark hair was spilled around her, and to Jareth, she looked almost ethereal. He looked around for any sign of who was responsible, but the room was empty. He had been too late. Jareth knew what he was going to do the moment he saw her lying there, unmoving. He knew that she was already low on blood, since they weren't able to feed at the blood bank. She was fading fast, and he knew that the only way to save her was to give her his blood. Drinking blood from a human was for survival, but drinking blood from another vampire was sacred. Without a second thought, Jareth lifted his hand and bit his wrist. He took his wrist and lowered it to Mara's mouth, letting the blood drip onto her lips and down her throat. Jareth could instantly feel their bond as his blood moved through her body. He could feel it wrap itself around all of her wounds, some small and some severe, and he urged it to mend her back together cell by cell. Jareth could feel himself start to weaken as he gave Mara more blood. He didn't care, though. He would give his life for this girl, even after everything that had happened in their past. Mara, Rio 1805. Mara loved Rio the moment she arrived. It was heavily populated, and she could escape from everything here. She had been running non-stop since this whole fiasco happened, and this was the first time that she allowed herself to stop and breathe. Brendan's death had been heartbreaking, and then add in Jareth, who now looked at her with nothing but hate and vengeance. Jareth was a hardened hunter, and he would stop at nothing to catch his prey, and in this case that happened to be her head. Over the years, he had shown her that he was merciless in his pursuit. Mara couldn't decide which was worse, but she knew that she was broken as a result. She had lost a piece of herself when she killed Helena, and she was too far gone now to try to find it again. She knew that she was spiraling out of control, lost with no beacon, no reason to live. Her pursuit to try to bring back Brendan was fruitless and tiresome, and she had started to question the importance of it. Even if she was successful, Mara was a shell of the person she used to be. Not to mention that their shared love with Jareth would be no more. It would be a bleak future, and the idea held little promise to her. This line of thinking went on for days, then weeks, into months, and finally into years. The days were void of anything, and they all seemed to run together. Mara was losing herself, and she didn't care. She just wanted the pain to go away, far away. The pain that had gripped her was suffocating her, and she couldn't breathe from the pressure. She was floundering in a restless sea that would never calm. For the first time, Mara felt like ending it. She was tired of running from Jareth, from Brendan's memory, and from herself. Everything seemed like a wasted effort. She no longer had anything to live for, just a stupid quill who forced her to start anew every time she jumped. Deciding that she was ready, Mara sought out a local apothecary and found what she was looking for. It was silver-laced arsenic, and would do the trick nicely. All she had to do was drink it, and she would be free. Mara decided that the following day would be the big day. She dressed in a beautiful gown, and placed a jeweled comb in her hair. She was nervous, but knew that this was the only answer to her troubles. She arranged herself on the bed, and laid down with the vial in her hand. Taking a deep breath, she opened the small container and quickly drank it down. Mara started to cough and choke. Her airways were closing off, and she felt herself gasping for air. Instantly, Mara changed her mind about dying. This was wrong, and she started to cry, the red tears streaking down her pale face. She managed to crawl out of the bed, and she pushed herself to make it outside. Every movement felt like her last, the pain burning her skin from the inside out. She barely made it to the outside of the door when someone came up and tried to help her. The woman got down on the ground to get closer to Mara, and that is when she mustered up enough strength to bite her. The blood was like heaven in her veins, and she greedily drank from the stranger. Mara could feel the human's pulse slowing down, but she didn't care. She continued to suck, only stopping when the women went limp and lifeless. This wasn't the first person she had killed, but she couldn't dwell on that now because she could sense that Jareth was near. Leave it to Jareth to find her when she was at her weakest, both mentally and physically. Mara moved as quickly as her body would let her, and grabbed the quill from inside. She closed her eyes and let her heart do the work. Chapter 6. Mara, present day. Mara awoke and saw Jareth's face hovering over hers. "Hello, beautiful," he said with the biggest smile possible. Mara wasn't sure, but it was almost as if she could feel his happiness. She must have hit her head too hard or something. "What happened?" she asked. "You almost died," Jareth said somberly. "I tried to save you, I could hear you screaming, but when I got here I was too late." He ran his fingers through her hair before he went on. "I was forced to give you my blood." Mara stilled. "Blood? His blood? You gave me your blood? Jareth, you know what that means. What if I didn't want that?" Jareth moved so that she could sit up, and they could be eye to eye. "Mara, there was no other choice. If I hadn't done it, then you would be dead right now, and to me that wasn't even an option," he said as he cupped her face gently with his hands. "I've been chasing you for all of these years, and yet when the moment came for your imminent death, I couldn't let it end that way. You are permanently in my heart, and I couldn't lose you. So now we are bonded in the most intimate way possible." He leaned in and gently
censored
her. While their other
censored
had been wonderful, she could now feel everything more vividly. The
censored
deepened, and Mara relished Jareth's love. "We've got to get out of here before something else happens," Mara said as they pulled away. Jareth helped her up, and led her the way he had come from. There had to be an exit somewhere. They walked in silence, not wanting to alarm whoever might still be lurking around. Mara still couldn't believe that Jareth had given her his blood. That was a selfless act of love, and she wasn't sure how to reciprocate the bold gesture. She remained quiet in thought, as they left all of the darkness behind them. "Jareth, I have an idea about the quill, but I'm not sure if it will work," Mara said. "I'm open to anything at this point. Before, when I tried to use the quill, it wouldn't work, and that was the first time something like that had happened. And I was thinking that maybe it didn't work because my heart wasn't the only one involved. When you were chasing me, it was each one of us for ourselves, and only our own heart mattered. But now that we are on the same page, we have two hearts who want the same thing. I think that we need to try it with both of the quills, together. That's actually a really good idea, Mara, Jareth said with a smile. He rose from his seat and headed towards the door. Let me go get my quill and I will be right back. And with that, he was gone. Mara looked around the small research room they had commandeered from the librarian earlier. There were books strewn around all surfaces, and she could feel the hope building inside of her. Would this really work? More importantly, what would happen when we did arrive back then? Would there be two versions of myself? Or would I take over my older self? Would we arrive in time to save Brendan? Would all of this craziness work out after all? The questions were flooding her brain, and she couldn't stop them. Deciding she needed to try to find more answers, Mara went back to the open stack of books and tried to find something that they had missed before. Anything that might help them. Mara was still pored over the books when Jareth returned carrying his quill in his hand. Did you find anything else while I was gone? He asked. Mara shook her head. No, nothing that we didn't already know, she said as she closed the book. Are you ready? Jareth took a deep breath and nodded his head. It's time, he said as he laid his quill on the table next to Mara's. She moved to stand next to him, picking up her quill in the process. We need to both be thinking of Brendan's death for this to work. Mara, I know how this works, Jareth joked. Haha, very funny, Mara deadpanned. I know that, but this is serious. What if we aren't thinking the same, and we end up in different places? Then what? Jareth lifted his hand to rub his finger down her cheek. Then I will hunt you down until I find you again, he reassured as he let his hand drop. He leaned in and drew in Mara for a sweet
censored.
If they were going to be separated, then he wanted this memory to hold him. Jareth, I just want you to know that I love you. I'm sorry about the past, but I'm glad that you're with me again. Shish, Jareth soothed, don't worry about that now. Just know that my heart is yours, forever and always. Mara nodded, and they moved so that they were both ready to write with their quills. Jareth gave her a quick smile before closing his eyes to focus. Mara followed suit, and it didn't take long for their quills to light up and start to write the coordinates. They disappeared from the library in a flash, leaving nothing but a pile of books behind them. Mara, Greece, 1608. Mara ended up exactly where her heart wanted to go. It was nighttime, and the village was lit up with torch lanterns. Looking down, Mara could see that she was dressed in her favorite old dress and cloak. She had her basket in her arm, but it was empty. She looked around for Jareth, but couldn't see any sign of him. Needing to find him, she headed towards the woods where they had met for the first time. It was there that reminded her of him the most. She wasn't sure how this going back in time thing worked. She would definitely need to be cautious, until she found out if there were two of her running around. Moving as quiet as possible, Mara made her way through the heart of the village. The moon spilled silver light on the field between the village edge and the start of the woods. The trees swayed softly in the night air. Mara ran her fingers over the tips of the tall grass, and her mind sparked with past memories. Images of her and Jareth flashed like a slideshow through her mind, and it set off a longing that was intense and bordering on painful. Their connection before was so loving and soft, and yet this felt tormented. Had something happened to him? Surely he had made it too. Mara moved a little faster, trying to find Jareth. She moved through the familiar terrain, until her slipper caught on a tree root, causing her to spill forward. She started to get up when she heard the voice. Would you like a hand, miss? The young man said. Mara saw the hand that was lowered to her face, and she knew that this was Jareth, young Jareth, not the man that had
censored
her at the library. Mara's heart broke in that instant, and she didn't know what else to do, so she took the offered hand and got to her feet. Thank you, she said, trying not to cry. Her heart had fallen out of her.
censored.
And there was a gaping hole from Jareth's disappearance. How was she supposed to do this without him? They had a plan, and now her shoulders were burdened alone. This Jareth looked at her, and it was then that Mara realized that this wasn't how they had originally met. How much had she already changed the past by disturbing the chain of events? Mara made a mental note to think things through before she acted. Hopefully, her slip-up wouldn't have severe consequences. Mara looked at this Jareth, and while they might look the same, they were anything but. This younger version was carefree and joyful. He was beautiful, and it was easy to see why she had fallen for him in the first place. The man she had left behind was hardened by years of hate and injustice. And even though they were better now, their suffering was built into the foundation of their love. "May I accompany you?" he asked. Mara smiled. "Yes, I was just headed to find a moonflower." "Moonflower?" Jareth asked as they started to slowly walk. "It's a flower that only blooms at night time. The petals are white with just the barest hint of pink, and its shape is reminiscent of a moon." Mara tried to recall their first conversation, and was hoping that she was close enough to the original. The two continued on the dimly lit path, talking about anything and everything. Jareth was talking about his interest in things that were unexplainable, when Mara suddenly stopped. "Oh look," she joyfully cried. "Right there. There it is." Jareth looked in the direction of her pointing, and sure enough, there was the exact flower she had described earlier. The flower looked delicate and starkly beautiful against the darkness of the night. But the flower had nothing on the angel standing in front of him. Jareth, present day. Jareth landed hard on the cement sidewalk. The time traveling must have really done a number on him, because he couldn't even gather enough strength to move his arms or legs. He could hear movement from the busy street, but nothing that was familiar. He opened his eyes and looked around him. It was then that the panic set in. This modern world was not anywhere close to where he should have landed. He should be in his childhood village with Mara and his family. That was where his heart was supposed to take him. What had gone wrong that he would have ended up here? And what about Mara? Was she here too, or did she make it to the right place? He finally found the strength to sit up, and reached around for his quill. His search came up empty, and Jareth started to worry. He looked around again, and still couldn't find anything. He cried as he fell back down to the ground in defeat. Chapter 7. Mara, Greece, 1608. Spending time with Brendan was indescribable. When Mara had seen his beautiful face again after so long, it was like coming home. She fought back the tears, and tried to act normal so that he wouldn't suspect anything. His voice was her favorite part. Whereas Jareth's speech had evolved and modernized over the years, Brendan's was still heavy with the old-world accent. It was his sexy voice that sent tremors down her body when he whispered softly in her ear. "I have something nice for you," Brendan spoke softly as he ran his hand down Mara's arm. He gathered her hand and pulled it up for a gentle
censored.
Mara smiled as he led her, still holding her hand, to a secluded part of an empty field. If Mara hadn't already been in love with this man, then the scene before her would have sealed the deal. There were soft blankets and furs spread out on the ground, to make it soft and inviting. A small fire was gently crackling, casting a glow over everything around it. The whole effect was just oozing romance. "I found dinner too," he said as he used his hand to motion for someone. Out of the darkness, a young girl, who looked to be no more than 18, came forward. She was under Brendan's spell, and easily did as she was commanded. He told her to lay down and to get comfortable. Mara watched the girl, and she could feel her fangs begging to come out. Once the girl was settled, Brendan motioned for Mara to join her. She knelt down on the side of the girl, and ran her hand gently over her forehead and down her cheek. Mara moved the girl's long blonde hair back out of the way, and then looked back at Brendan. "Join me," she offered. He nodded his head, and Mara waited for him to get in position. Brendan moved to the girl's other side, and picked up her pale wrist. "Ladies first," he smiled as he waited for Mara to begin. Mara lowered her head, and ran her nose against the girl's neck. She could smell the blood just beneath the skin calling to her. Mara had drunk with her family in the past, but never with a lover, and the anticipation was beyond exciting. She licked the spot and her fangs appeared just before she bit down. The girl's blood was pure and clean as it worked its way down her throat and through her body. Mara looked up as she continued to feed, and locked eyes with Brendan. His eyes were filled with love and longing. He brought the girl's wrist to his mouth and licked slowly before he bit her. The girl started to moan and her body started to move on its own, her pleasure building. Mara and Brendan continued to watch each other as they drank. Chills went down Mara's spine as she thought of his beautiful lips on her own body. His eyes were so expressive, and it was like he was talking to her without saying anything at all. When Mara felt the girl's pulse starting to fade, she moved back and made sure to lick the bite marks so that there would be no wound. Brendan followed suit, and then whispered something in the girl's ear as he lovingly patted her shoulder. Without a word, the girl rose and left, leaving Mara and Brendan behind. Brendan closed the short distance between them, and pulled Mara close to him. He ran his hand up into her hair, and moved his fingers through its silkiness. He trailed soft,
censored,
from her shoulder to her neck, and moved slowly down to her collarbone, licking her like she had licked the girl. Mara found herself helpless in his embrace. He continued his trail, moving to her ear and across her cheek, making his way to her mouth where he stopped. His beautiful eyes moved up and caught Mara's, and she knew that he was silently asking her. Brendan had always been the sweeter one of the two, and it was evident right now. Mara leaned in slightly, and slowly captured his lips with her own. She tilted her head, and neither one of them moved except to
censored.
Their movements were slow and languid, each tantalizing the other. It was as if they had all the time in the world to explore one another, and Mara was going to make every second count.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
Mara was pacing around the woods, trying to think of a way to save Brendan from his impending death the next day. If she intervened, then Brendan would live, and if she did nothing, then both Helena and Brendan would die like they had before. Mara knew that in her heart there was no way that she would be able to lose Brendan again, not after she had just got him back. Mara had been observing Helena, studying her whereabouts and trying to see if she could find any weaknesses. Her time had been fruitless because Helena's only weakness was her boys. Mara was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't even hear the sound of footsteps approaching her. When she felt a strong hand on her shoulder, she almost jumped out of her skin. She turned around and stopped short. Her mind must be playing tricks on her because the person standing in front of her looked a lot like Jareth, her Jareth. She could feel her heart yearning for this man standing in front of her. He ran the back of his fingers down her face and pulled her in for a heart-stopping
censored.
In this moment, no words were needed as their two souls reconnected and became one again. The
censored
went on until Mara finally pulled back. "Oh Jareth," she said, "I've missed you so much. Where have you been?" "What happened?" she asked. "Mara, my sweet love. When we jumped, I ended up in the future instead of in the past," Jareth explained. "The future? Apparently, that is where I landed. Horrible place too. I lost my quill and it took me a while to find it. I was scared that I wasn't going to be able to, and that I wouldn't be able to make my way back to you." "Where did you find it?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm finally here where I'm meant to be." Mara couldn't hold back the tears that were falling down her face. "What's this for?" Jareth asked. "I'm just so happy that you are here and in one piece, safe and sound. My heart has been aching for you. And I'm troubled because I can't seem to come up with a solution for tomorrow." "What's tomorrow?" "The day that Helena kills Brendan, and I kill Helena." "Oh, that day. I keep running the events in my head, and I just can't seem to find any way to change it. I can't let her kill him," Mara cried as Jareth pulled her into a comforting hug. "Why don't you start at the beginning, and go from there? I wasn't there originally until the very end, so maybe I can see something that you are missing," Jareth suggested. Mara nodded. "That's a good idea." And with that, she started her story from the beginning. "Are you sure about this?" Mara asked Jareth the next day. "Mara, we've been over this." "Yes, I am sure. 100%. Even though Jareth could sense Mara's feelings from their shared connection, He didn't need that to tell that Mara was nervous about today. They had stayed up late into the night, going over their game plan and making sure that every option was tested. The plan was simple. Jareth would wait until the last second to distract Helena, and while he was doing that, Mara would help Brendan to safety. Together they had decided that Helena would still have to die. There was no way that she would let them live in peace after her attempted murder. Mara was surprised by Jareth's decision. She figured that he would want his mother to live, but apparently that wasn't the case. Maybe his love for his brother outshined his love for his mother in this case. Jareth decided to hide behind a peddler's cart, and Mara chose a dark, secluded archway to hide and wait for Helena and Brendan to appear. It wasn't too long before they could hear raised voices coming their way. Mara couldn't tell what they were saying, but she knew from the sound of their voices that it was them. She stayed quiet and watched them as they walked past her and then stopped. The argument had grown and harsh words were being thrown from both sides. Helena was trying to force Brendan to marry the original descendant girl, and he was professing his love for Mara instead. Brendan told his mother that he would give everything up to be with Mara and Jareth, and that is when Helena lost it. She lunged for him, grabbing a small wooden dagger from her ankle strap. Mara saw Jareth run out and try to intervene, and she knew that was her signal to go help Brendan. She dashed out from the archway and tried to dodge the scuffle between Jareth and Helena. Reaching her hand down, she offered it to Brendan, and he quickly took it. Together they watched as the pair continued to roll back and forth. Jareth might have more size, but Helena was an older vampire and just as powerful as her son. The pair shifted, and the wooden blade went slicing into Helena's
censored,
right where her heart was. Shock registered on her face as she died, her body turning into ash instantly. Jareth fell back, his
censored,
heaving from the exertion and his arms limp at his sides. Mara wanted to go to him and offer help, but she knew that he needed a minute to process everything and that he would come to her when he was ready. She hugged Brendan, who was openly crying over his mother trying to kill him and grieving over her loss at the same time. Chapter 8. The three of them fled to Jareth's chamber where they spread out. Mara sat down on the chair, Jareth leaned against the wall, and Brendan walked in front of the two, where he stood quietly with his arms crossed. Brendan waited for their explanation of what had just occurred, but neither one of them spoke a word. Finally, he broke the silence. "Would one of you please explain to me what just happened outside?" he asked, his voice sounding strained. "Because it looks like Jareth just killed our mother, and I want to be clear as to the reason." Mara looked at Jareth to see if he would answer, but he was like stone. "She was going to kill you, Brendan," Mara said quietly. She looked up and spoke directly to him. "She was going to kill you. We had no other choice but to intervene, and Helena's death was the only outcome. She didn't have to die." Brendan yelled. "She was my mother, our mother," he roared as he turned to face Jareth. "What right did you have to decide who lived and died? How could you?" he said as he started to sob. Brendan fell to his knees and let the red tears flow freely. Mara's heart was breaking, but this was their moment, not hers. So she watched silently as Jareth knelt down next to his brother and put a hand on his shoulder. He pulled Brendan to him and held him as he mourned their mother. Jareth's face was filled with anguish and heartbreak, but he remained stoic, providing a supportive shoulder for his brother. "We need to talk," he said after Brendan had calmed down. "There are things that have happened. Do you remember Mara's quill? The one that the oracle gave you?" Brendan asked as he looked at Mara. Mara shook her head. "Yes, that one," she answered. "I was at the market one day, and I found a quill that looked exactly like Mara's. I quickly bought it and hoped to surprise Mara with it." Jareth stopped and took a deep breath. "I was walking and I could see Mara ahead of me, so I picked up my pace, but when I got closer to where she was, I could see that she was struggling with our mother. Your body was on the ground, and Mara lunged forward and killed Helena." Brendan looked from Jareth back to Mara. "How is that possible? I just saw Jareth kill Helena. You had nothing to do with it." "That's where the quill comes in," Jareth answered. After Mara killed Helena, she was gone, like a ghost she had vanished, but not before I had seen her with the quill. In my heart, I knew that Mara had used her quill to leave without a word of explanation. Before I even knew what I was doing, I already had my quill out, and I knew that my heart would lead me to wherever she had gone. Jareth chased me for over 400 years before he finally caught me, Mara explained. Everything that had happened was a horrible mistake, and I spent many, many years trying to find a way to atone for my actions. I traveled many places looking for clues, searching for answers, hoping to go back and save you. It wasn't until Jareth and I teamed up that we were able to find a way back to you. Mara reached for Brendan's hand. You might have died that day, but you never left my heart, not for a single moment. You both have to know how unbelievable this sounds. Who even has such an instrument, and what are the chances of Jareth finding a second quill? Brendan questioned. But I cannot deny that you two saved me this morning. That is indeed a fact. I think for all of our sakes, I will try to believe in your story. Mara and Jareth felt like a huge hurdle had been cleared when Brendan said those words. They knew that it was a lot to ask of him, and it was reassuring to know that he was making an effort. One question though, Brendan said, why would my mother try to kill me? You were supposed to be a member of the council, the highest of accolades, and you didn't want anything to do with it. Our mother couldn't understand that. She had a sense of duty to herself and the council, and there was no place for such foolish things as love. So when you told her that all you wanted to do was love Mara, she flipped her lid, Jareth explained. Flipped her lid? Brendan asked with a confused look on his face. Mara laughed. It means that she went crazy, she continued in a more serious tone. I came upon you and your mother, and you were both already fighting. The next thing I remember is that you were dead. Your body turned to ash before my very eyes, and Helena immediately went on the offense. She blamed me for your demise and ultimate death. She was relentless and wouldn't leave me alone. She was going to kill me, and I was so enraged by your death that I killed her before she had the chance to kill me. Brendan moved in close to Mara and lifted her hand to his lips. Thank you, Mara. First for avenging me and secondly for coming back to save me, he said as he ran his thumb over her fingers. Mara's face registered shock. But I killed your mother. Brendan shook his head and
censored
her on the forehead. Don't you see the bigger picture? By killing my mother the first time, you were able to save yourself, and eventually you found a way back to me. I truly believe that Helena would never have let us live in peace. My heart will grieve, but it will also heal. Tears were running down Mara's face at Brendan's kind words. Chapter 9. Mara leaned in and deepened the
censored
that Brendan had started. The
censored
seemed to last forever. It wasn't until she felt Jareth at her back that she pulled back from Brendan. Jareth placed
censored
at the base of her neck and
censored
a path down to her shoulder, gently sucking as he went. Mara's head fell back in surrender, and Jareth didn't waste any time pulling her into a
censored.
Brendan stepped back to lift up her dress and remove it, along with her undergarments. Once she was completely
censored,
Jareth gently pulled her face back to continue there.
Censored.
Brendan ran a finger down her,
Censored.
right in the valley of her.
Censored.
Mara's breath hitched and she could feel her
Censored.
harden in anticipation.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
Brendan reached out and ran his hand over Mara's cheek and down to her chin. He leaned in and
Censored.
Mara with such passion that it sent in
Censored.
straight to her core. These two beautiful men would be her lovers for the rest of time, and Mara couldn't wait to spend every moment with them, wrapped up in their love. There was just one thing she had to do first. I want us to share blood, she told Brendan. I love you, and I want to be with you forever. You are in my heart and my soul, and it would be the greatest privilege to share yourself. Brendan took a moment to take in Mara's request. Have you two already done so? He asked. Yes, Jareth said. It was life or death. Mara was injured, and she would have died if we hadn't exchanged blood. He looked at Mara, and felt her joy radiating inside of her. It is a most beautiful thing to be so close to another. I would love nothing more than, Brendan said to Mara. Anything you ask of me I shall give you. Without another word, Brendan moved so that he was sitting up in bed with his back against the headboard. He spread his legs and gathered Mara in between his legs so that her back was to his.
Censored.
He wrapped his arms around her middle and then offered his wrist to her. Mara.
Censored.
His wrist and then licked it. She closed her eyes and sank her fangs into his flesh. His blood tasted divine, and Mara greedily sucked. At the same time that she was sucking his wrist, he moved her hair to the side so that he could bite her neck. Mara could feel their connection deepening, like hers and Jareth's had. The sensation was utterly wonderful, and left her feeling lovingly safe. The two broke apart, and laid down so that the three of them could cuddle together. It wasn't long after that they fell asleep in each other's arms. Epilogue. Mara stood at the balcony of the bungalow, her sarong gently blowing in the soft breeze. After everything that had happened, they decided to take a vacation and get reconnected with each other. The island that they'd chosen was beautiful, and the flowers had the most vibrant colors. The sun was just getting ready to set, and the world looked picture perfect. She couldn't help but to think that in hindsight the quill did help her choose. She lost Brendan, but with Jareth's help she got him back again. Now the three of them had their shot at the happy ending they deserved. Thank you for reading my book. If you like this story, I think you'll enjoy my book. Get your copy of Sold to the Werewolf now. Please leave a review if you like this book. That's the best thing you can do to help authors like me, so others can find my books. It can be as long or as short as you'd like. Even a star rating is amazing and appreciated. Thanks in advance. About Summer Cooper. Thank you so much for reading. Without you, it wouldn't be possible for me to be a full-time author. I hope you enjoy reading my books as much as I do writing them. Besides, obviously, reading and writing, I also love cuddling my dogs, shouting at Alexa, being upside down aka yoga, and driving my family cray-cray. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Goodreads, BookBub. Get in touch at hello@summercooper.com. www.summercooper.com. Closing credits. This has been Undying Love. Written by Summer Cooper. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Copyright 2024 by Lovie Books Limited. Production copyright 2024 by Lovie Books Limited.